Losing a loved one to suicide is a tragedy that many of us can't fully understand unless we've lived through it. But in this episode, we will be speaking with Darren Anderson, who has experienced this loss firsthand when his brother Mark took his own life in 2018. In honor of his brother, Darren created Love My Mind, a non-profit initiative dedicated to spreading awareness for mental health and funding smaller projects related to suicide prevention, addiction, and other related illnesses, and hopefully preventing others from facing the same heartbreaking loss. We hope you enjoy this most important episode. When I started the podcast a few months ago, I wanted to bring relevant and timely discussions so that others might find something in the content that would help them and others around them. And when I learned about your foundation and the story behind it, I was really moved to contact you. Obviously, I reached out to you to be a guest on the show because I really believe that mental health awareness and suicide prevention is something we can all share and really support. So thank you for being here today and for sharing your journey with us.
Absolutely, and thanks for the invite, Quinn. It has been quite a journey, and it's interesting how things happen in one's life that, like 6 years ago for me, mental health was the furthest thing from my mind and from my day to day, and then through tragedy, things changed. My life changed, and not necessarily for the worse, actually, in a lot of ways for the better, which I'll touch on as I talk about my story. Mm-hmm. So it was just over 6 years ago now, actually right around this, 6 years ago this time. We lost my brother Mark, who was my older brother by 9 years, to suicide that was induced by depression and addiction. And even though, Quinn, the signs were there, the flags were there, it's still, you never think that it's going to get to that extreme, especially even 6 years ago when mental health conversations didn't really exist. So leading up to that was a big part of everything because he lived his own life. He would come out, but he would be very recluse. Like, a lot of people didn't go over to his house. He had a big dog, beautiful dog, Storm. And so we weren't over there a lot knowing what was going on kind of behind the scenes. My brother and myself were very close. We did a lot of work together. Again, it's when you hear of these tragedies to suicide, it's almost like the ones you least expect. He was always smiling, always laughing. He had that big boisterous laugh, and people gravitated to him. He's that guy. But he always talked about, to me, his demons. And again, 6 years ago, I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, what demons? Like, what are you dealing with or not dealing with here? And as we got closer to the facts, I just realized that he was struggling and he was trying very hard to get healthy, but the system, Quinn, was so broken. Like, there was so many gaps in the system. Everywhere we turned, we ran into a brick wall, so to speak. Mm-hmm. The only real resource that we had at the time was like a free 5-day detox center. And then what? Yeah. Everywhere we reached out to, you had to be sober for 2 weeks before you even went on the waiting list. And then there was a waiting list of like 2, 3, 4 months. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't fighting the fact that there was a problem. Mm-hmm. We just couldn't find that path to recovery very quickly. It was very frustrating. So we tried our best to sort of like band-aid the situation. We brought in some people that we knew that were recovering addicts. We got him to AA, which is definitely cart before the horse, because he needed professional help. He needed detox in the facility. So on paper, everything was starting to look fine. He was like social media and saying that he was 3 months sober, 4 months sober. But I knew better because I was the one checking in on him. And then it just got worse. It was all compounded. We lost our dad just over a year prior. He was battling Alzheimer's. I could see his business declining because his clients were reaching out to me and mentioning they thought there was an issue. So there was a lot of signs, but still at the end of the day, I would have never anticipated the end result that we went through, and that day came in November on the 19th, where my mom went over to his house to bring him food. That's what moms do, and make sure he's okay. The truck was there, the TV was on, the dog was barking, and she phoned me and she said, I can't get a hold of him. I don't know if he's in the house. And so in my gut, I knew something was wrong, and I phoned the switchboard at the police station. And the officers were on site within minutes. It seemed like they were fantastic through the whole situation. Mm. We got into the house through the back door, which was open, and thank goodness my mother did not go through that back door. I remember saying that I don't have a good feeling about this, and then that's when the officer came out and he says, we have a deceased person. Unfortunately, we cannot determine his identity based on how the situation occurred. And instant shock. I remember saying, even though being in shock, said, oh, don't worry, I'll go in and I'll let you know who it is. And he's like, oh, no, you're not going anywhere. And then it hit me. And I remember going to my knees and Ian putting his hand on my shoulder. And the first thing that went through my mind was, my mother is sitting out front waiting for her boys to walk out there. And now, being the last male in our family, I have to go tell my mom that her oldest son is gone. And then tell his daughter her dad's gone, and tell my sister that her brother is gone. And without knowing it, the male stigma was in full effect. I turned very stoic. I'm showing no emotion. I don't think I cried for weeks. And because I knew I had to be strong for my family. Yeah. And especially you're going to the toughest time of year, like Christmas time is such an emotional time for most families. I just had to get us through this difficult time. And I was just like a zombie. But I was very alert. I immediately went back to work. Got the family through Christmas, just made sure everything was okay. Until halfway through January, Ian said, we need to go out east or west. And you need some time to process this and grieve and figure out what's going on, because you haven't done anything. I know, and I'm not going to say this, but everyone's worried about you. And of course, it's like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I got this. Yeah. But we went, and it was the best thing that I could have done, because it disconnected me from everything. I was amongst my closest people in my life other than my family. And then I just went through it. I was out there for a week. I cried every day. Yeah. I didn't understand what went on. I shouldered it. Thinking that I could have done something different, I could have done something more. And it was just like a goosh of emotion was just leaving me. And thank goodness for my friends that they were replenishing it with good thoughts and good memories and how we're going to move forward from this. And that's when I started thinking about the why, like how consumed would one's mind be to make that decision to end your life. And the way he did it and again, not to be too graphic, but using a shotgun that was given to him by his father. was his first, and they hunted together, and so it's like really resonated. It said to me that he had this was planned. Like he had a plan to do this. Like this was thought out. And but how dark would it become to make that ultimate decision? And then on the flip side, like I said earlier, not having those support systems in place to maybe change that mindset and get him going down a different path. So it was a lot of thoughts going through my mind, and that was the thing, is like, when this disease starts to consume us, do we have control anymore, or is this disease start consuming us and start making decisions for us about drinking and how we feel? And then there's the depression and the anxiety and the negative thoughts and the self-worth, the doubt of self-value and self-worth. So then it started to make a little more sense, but then I felt I need to be able to use my network, my platform. And what that looked like to me was men have a tough time having conversations, showing emotion, being vulnerable. So I was in a better place, and I started talking to my marketing team about creating a brand based on my vision. Are we capable of loving our own mind? Yeah. What came out of that was Love My Mind. And then I started just connecting with my community. Everyone knew what went on. Yeah. And everyone's so gracious and respectful of the situation. But when I did reach out, everyone was like, what do you need? And I just said, I think I want to talk. And Quinn, it was amazing. And I'll never forget. And you probably know this guy. He, great guy, fireman. We saw each other in Sobeys. So two men grocery shopping, surrounded by women. And he came across and gave me this big hug, and we both broke down and we're in tears. And after the fact, I thought, wonder what these women were thinking. And now, fast forwarding, is like, they were like, this is what my brother needs to do. This is what my father needs to do. This is what my son needs to, like, it almost, I'm quite certain that was the thought. And then we sat there and we talked for 45 minutes, and I told him what was going on, and he started opening up to me. So right then and there, I knew that if one shows vulnerability, the other will follow. And then it happened again in another conversation, and then in another. And I'm like, wow, there's an opportunity here of making a dent in this. And it comes with conversation, connection and conversation. And then I just started rolling things forward, creating the brand, getting it out there, having more content, more of a direction. It was interesting. My marketing firm was the lead behind when Kevin O'Leary came to Saskatoon doing his entrepreneurial travels, and he was giving back to each community from his ticket sales. And his best friend committed suicide, and he wanted to make our initiative the beneficiary. And it took a while, but 2 months later, we got a check for $32,000. Wow. And then he contacted me, says, I need this. Your community needs this to be successful. Yeah. And then we still didn't really know what it was going to look like, but it had to do with being able to get people that were struggling in front of our professionals quicker than it was happening. People weren't getting support, and it was months upon months. So I just started partnering with counseling services, independent counselors, nutritionists, fitness people, anything that had to do with mental health and mental wellness. And there was more than I thought there would be. And then we just started building the community. And fast forward 6 years later, we have helped so many people and honestly saved many lives. With this initiative, we've given back over $250,000 now to Saskatoon organizations like the Crisis Intervention, Prairie Harm, YWCA, and other initiatives that needed help starting like we did. And I always remember this, Shannon from Evolve said, "You've created a beautiful monster." And that's what we kind of reference it to now, is this beautiful monster that is just there to facilitate and help any way we can. And then connecting with you and having our conversation over coffee, and you being very open and upfront and vulnerable with me and hugging it out and sharing a tear. So it's been an amazing journey. And with that, it's made me understand mental health more, but my own mental health, and what do I need to do to benefit myself and show more emotion and be more open. And so I sometimes relate to Mark's passing as a blessing. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to people that will be watching this, but
Sure.
I know that he was struggling, and I know that he was in pain, because it's a daily occurrence that they can't get rid of. And they make that decision. And I know he's in a better place, and he had trouble using his words to reach out. And now we use the Love My Mind initiative to be the voice that he never could use.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to ask a few questions based on some of the things you've said. In researching for today's episode, I came across a quote that said, "The saddest thing about mental health and the pain that it causes is that it often, if ever, can be seen." And that made me really think back to, I had a teammate when I played CFL that when I did finally get to talk to him years after we had both retired, he had said, "I would walk into the facility every day, and inside my mind was just depression and anxiety and sadness and loneliness, even though he was amongst 65 of his brothers." And he said that was harder than if I had walked in on crutches. Because he said if I had walked in on crutches, people would know immediately what I was dealing with. And he said that was the hardest thing, was putting on this face, was trying to be, especially as a professional athlete, trying to be stoic and strong and not showing. And this is back in the 90s, you got to remember, right? When the stigma was still pretty heavy. So I want to go back to something you said about your relationship with your brother. And, this obviously wasn't something that just happened suddenly. You said it was months, if not years, where he was struggling. But you said something that really, really hit home for me, as you said there was nothing out there that was immediate and available for us to get him into a program, someone to talk to. And I'll speak to something on a personal level later, but I want to talk about that specifically right now, and how your program, how Love My Mind, is helping change that, because I have experienced firsthand making that phone call and hearing 8 weeks, 12 weeks, hearing, okay, they have to do this first. I had someone say that they had dialed 988, which is the suicide hotline, and they said that they were actually greeted by a series of prompts. And I'm not trying to make light of this, but when someone is calling something like that, and the first thing you hear is, if you're experiencing this, press 1. It's like, I shake my head, and I know it's getting better, and it's through foundations like yours. So more specifically, Darren, I apologize for going on a bit of
Yeah, it's all good.
But do you think there still are walls to break down in terms of that immediate help? What have you seen from a positive change from the health region, and has your foundation been able to enact some positive change as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's the question that's been pending for, again, a few years now. And I appreciate your comment, about Mark and the struggle. And it was years, and now I realize that it's childhood trauma, and everyone shelves that. But we need to take accountability for our own mental health. We need to make that one step forward. When there's a bunch of people taking 3 or 4 or 5 steps towards you to help, you need to take that one step. End of story. And my brother never did, but my brother dealt with a lot of issues about his childhood with his relationship with my dad, which I never knew about. I became privy to that information after the fact. Not shocking. My dad was a very old school man, like most fathers. NHL hockey player, big dude, 6'4". Left home at 15. Just he did it on his own for the most part, and he had high expectations of his kids, and I would never say that my brother was a disappointment for him, but when your other siblings are doing what your father deems as great things and you're not, you're going to feel that in some way. And again, being 9 years younger than him, I never thought about that. We weren't that close growing up because we were just in different circles at different times. We became closer as we got older, which usually happens. But that's the one thing to the first part of your question, that I realized that it's the trauma that you grew up with, that it does come back to haunt us. Mm-hmm. The next part of your question, Quinn, is that I know that we made a lot of changes since losing Mark, and our initiative saw those changes firsthand. I'll never forget when we met one of our partners, and it was Healing to the Max. Amazing family, lost their teenage boy, Max, to suicide. This kid, again, but in this case, they check all the boxes in a good way. Athlete, SRC, good-looking kid, academically inclined, popular, struggled. And he came forward to his parents and talked about it. They then went to the immediate resource that they were given and said, my son is struggling. He's admitted he's had suicidal thoughts, suffering from depression. How can we get him some help? They put him on a waiting list. A month and a half later, Max was gone. Took his own life. Didn't make it to the facility. The facility actually called them 3 weeks later, say we have an opening. That's when they realized, wow, this system is so broken. Yeah. And our child is gone because there was no help. They turned that tragedy into Healing to the Max, and it is parents and professionals that have come to support the survivors, the moms, the dads, the siblings that have dealt or are dealing with loss due to suicide. That was one of our biggest and best partners, and still partners, where we were able to help out financially and with resources. There a lot of great things I feel have occurred, especially in the last 2 years. Kind of once we got out of that crazy thing, COVID, that I still don't even think happened, but it did. And because that affected a lot of people too, especially our kids. But now I just see a lot of good things happening. And like I mentioned to you earlier too, we were able to create a men's mental health support network because we felt that men were ready if given the proper, safe environment. So we're on our second series already, and they are all full. We've had 18 sessions and had a small waiting list. So now we're looking to expand upon that going into 2025. We're launching our first lunch and learn that will be categorized, so to speak. So the first one we're doing January 30th is for the trades industry. So we want to spin that category into its own men's support network. and not to omit women, because I know there's a lot of women in trades, but we're trying to build the men's network that we created a year ago, not really vertically, but horizontally. We want to add a bunch of series that we're running consecutively, serving the same purpose, but also serving like something that's very like-minded for people. So if we get trades and then do hospitality, sport parents, another one, teachers, by creating that safe environment, I think also this will be a game changer in our community.
I want to stay on the men's mental health. The statistics don't lie. The demographic that has the greatest number of suicides is men aged 40 to 59. I did the research. It's plain as day. And once again, not to discount or to reduce the effects of suicide amongst the other age groups or of either gender, but there seems to be a reticence or a hesitation to, I guess, by men at first, by men in general, to be able to talk about this, like you'd mentioned, and we'll get into that, but just by society in general. And that comes from decades of, the role that males have played, the ability to speak about their feelings. I mean, when I grew up, my grandfather never cried. It just wasn't a thing. And in fact, in doing the research, the highest number of suicides in Canada was actually during the 1970s and 80s, and they said that was largely due to the fact that there is still a heavy stigma attached to even talking about your mental health problem. So the tides are shifting a bit, which is great through programs like yours. How do we continue to reduce that particular stigma for men's mental health? What are some of the initiatives that are moving forward, or just what do you think, Darren, that maybe as men that we need to do? And you talked about vulnerability, so maybe speak on that.
That's a great question, and your stats aren't incorrect. There was a point a year ago, Quinn, that we were privy to 200 suicides in our community in the last year. Out of the 200 that took their own lives, 80 were in that age category that you mentioned. So the stats, they don't lie. And you're not wrong when you say that, well, that age demographic has a very tough time opening up, being vulnerable, asking for support, recognizing the fact that they do need help. But it just continued. And then people that I remember growing up with, going to university with, athletes and that, gone. And it was that exact same age category. And what we could decipher was they just weren't talking about it. They were not reaching out. They were not accepting the fact that they were in a crisis, and they were gonna fight through it and come out better on the other side. But as I spoke earlier, that disease consumes you, and it starts making you don't have conscious decision making anymore. It's moved aside, and this is what your day to day is going to look like now. Yeah. So with that said, more counselors we were talking to is like, we need to be more preventative. We need to be more preventative on substance abuse, on mental health struggles, and what that looks like. So there are more preventative programs that are in place, like the men's network, because again, if that's the stepping stone that from your norm, that you don't have that to go to, and you don't even have to talk. And because the few that I've been at, when it was crazy. It was 20 to 65 different cultures, different stories, different backgrounds. Some were very vocal, some didn't say a word. Yeah. But you just knew when I kind of panned the crowd, they were there for the right reasons. Yeah. And when it was the final session, they all went to the facilitator, Logan, and said, now what? Is it over? It can't be over. There was friendships created where they started supporting each other. That's amazing. They're like, well, we need more, because I have people that want to come. So then me and Logan sat down and said, all right, beautiful monster, another one's being created. What do we do? So I went back to the community and said, can you help? And gosh, it was just amazing. And our community has never seen anything like this, but it doesn't matter because everyone seems to step up. And that's another thing that I've seen, that when we do go for support, for help, for our projects, no one really says no. When it comes to mental health, we really realized that there is no such thing as no. Amazing, and a testament to our community. I think it's easier. It's not easier. Here's the thing. It's not easier to find a lot of these things, because I was told that when people do go search online, which is today's world, what they are finding is the number you mentioned, the suicide hotline, which we're not too sure about.
No.
Crisis intervention, which they are inundated. So that's not going to be even the first step to getting that support. And then they say, we find the Love My Mind brand in a lot of our searches. So I said, okay, we're now turning into a big resource portal for people. So that's kind of our recent pivot too, is we're changing our website and having all of our professionals on our website. So people, when they do land there, they can contact the professionals right away without even contacting one of us, so to speak. So there's just much more information on our website and people to get in touch with if you're in need of support.
I think you said it best in that I think there are a lot of support services out there, but it traditionally has been a bit of a fragmented industry. It's generally people would go directly to their family doctor, directly to the health region, potentially directly to the emergency room once it gets to that point. They might call a suicide hotline, 988. They search online for the services, and it's groups like yours that now are starting to rise to the top of that Google search, as you said. But it still feels like there needs to be somewhat more of a streamlined approach, which your group and other groups are trying to create. And it's phenomenal what I Love My Mind is doing. And I know, like you had mentioned, other groups out there that are doing the same thing. So there are support systems, but even prior to me learning about your group, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And 8-9 years ago, when I was going through this firsthand, and I know you guys weren't necessarily around then, but it's like I wish I knew of a group then that was like yours, that could get the person that I loved in to see someone sooner. But it is coming together. You're right. There are services out there, and it's getting better. I want to touch on something going back to the men's mental health. I think with any disease, but I think even more emphatically with mental health, having people who you would least expect to hear from, that they have suffered through it, that they have experienced it firsthand, sharing their stories is about as impactful an effect you can have for others to be able to come forward. And I'll speak to my own experience. I personally have had to take a leave from work. And I thought, here's an opportunity to share what I was going through with the business community through LinkedIn. And so I did a video post about what I was going through and my plan on how to handle it. But it was a dark time, Darren. I was astounded at the response, private messages, people commenting directly on the post. And I go back to that demographic of men 40 to 59, of which I'm, smack in the middle of it, is that people don't expect, an alpha male, strong, stoic type, former professional athlete to come forward and show that vulnerability. But when they do, hopefully others and other men see that.
Yeah.
And they go, wow, it's okay to talk about this. That is someone who you wouldn't think they would want to share that to protect themselves and their family, but they did. And it's not just me. There are others. I mean, I go back to, the late 90s, 2000s with Sheldon Kennedy and Theo Fleury sharing what they went through. Clara Hughes, Olympian. When professional athletes come forward and talk about their mental health struggles, their addiction struggles, it is just so impactful. And I think we need more of that. And it's groups like yours and others that are bringing that forward. Once again, not just in men's mental health, but in all demographics. And it's so good to see. And I want more people to feel like they can come forward. But my fear is that there is still, I almost feel like there's almost a bit of a tsunami that may be happening in the next decade, and that once again the systems are not going to be able to handle it.
I totally agree with you, Quinn. First of all, good on you, brother, for taking a platform that you have and showing your vulnerability and sharing your story amongst others. And it doesn't surprise me you got the feedback that you did. But on the flip side, it's like people like, holy shit, him? They don't expect it to come out of your mouth based on it's like
The persona.
perception,
Yeah.
behind the scenes. And
Yep.
for you to do that, I could honestly say right now that that post changed people's lives and possibly saved lives, and without even knowing it. And because like I've done it too. Like I remember my first speaking engagement 3 years ago now. And I publicly told my story like I told you today for the first time. And it was live. It was in front of 100 women. 100 women who are business owners, CEOs, CFOs. And I was just like, I got up and other women, there was 3 other women speakers. And there was 2 other men in way at the back. My first comments were, holy shit. But then there was tears and I wept. It wasn't planned. And honestly, Quinn, I had women getting up and leaving. But they weren't really leaving. So I finished and hugs, and they're like, and the conversation, Quinn, was so consistent. It was like, oh God, I wish my brother was here. Oh, I wish my father was here.
Yep.
I wish my husband was here. And the women that left actually they left the room to cry. And they came back and they came directly to me and said, your story is what men need to hear. And I said, yeah, but to think about it, these 100 women are going to go home and it's going to get to the men in their lives. And that's what happened. We had men reach out almost immediately after that conversation, speaking, and just like, hey, Darren, my wife saw you speak the other day. I just wanted to chat. And it was just, again, it was really 2 dudes just talking. It was like very nonchalant, very off the cuff. But it was a start.
Yeah.
And more of those conversations have happened. And I agree with you. Like, God, the people that we've lost in our community, not just the high profile people, but it's like people reach out to me and said, yeah, my cousin, 34 years old, just had a baby boy. He was so stressed about being able to provide. Am I enough? Am I worthy? And then these negative thoughts start consuming these people.
Yeah.
What can we do to interject when those thoughts start coming in versus when it's too late?
Yeah.
So the preventative aspect of mental health / suicide or suicidal ideation is the key. But again, some can hide it better than others. Some are very open to the fact, but the sad part is if I'm struggling and I don't let you know or anyone around me, there's nothing you can do. And with that said, my guys with the men's support network are wrapping up their sessions right now. And they said to me just the other day, like, do we have more money? Because we feel we can't wait to the next series to start with. And again, this is exactly what we need to happen is people with those networks and with those platforms to step up and let's make a difference here.
It's amazing the flood of support that happens for mental health awareness as opposed to other initiatives, whether it be a different disease or a different affliction. But I think it's because everybody has felt this way at one point, a time, or I mean, I challenge you to find me somebody who hasn't had depression at some point. The older you get and the more responsibility you have, the greater the chances that you have gone through it. I'm currently working on a coaching project to work with business owners and leaders to bring a more holistic approach to the coaching. It's not just about, profit and loss. It's about, can we get you into the gym? Can we get you to see a mental health, specialist? Things like that, because it needs to be holistic. The approach needs to be holistic. And something that I do appreciate about where I work is that when it comes to the health benefits, they've actually said, no, we're gonna actually promote this more, and it's something like $5,000 per employee to be able to go out and seek out a counselor, social worker, therapist, someone to help with mental health, because this is something that everyone can relate to. And it's only been in the last 10 years, especially since the Bell Let's Talk campaign, that this has really come to the forefront.
Yeah.
Which is great. And it's not trendy. I don't want to say it's trendy. It is just something that everyone can relate to. And I'm so glad to hear that you say that the business community and everybody that you've talked to, like, you're not getting doors slammed in your face.
No.
In fact, people are contacting you out of the blue.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Let's finish on this, Darren. I know you and I talked about a few of the initiatives going on. Love My Mind is the website. I want you to talk about what you're doing. Let's promote the website. Let's promote some of the programs and just promote this as much as you possibly can here in the last few minutes.
Yeah. So like I said, the Men's Support Network, which is on Instagram, and it's at Men's Support Network. But you can register on the evolvecounseling.com website. Easy to find. They're wonderful people. So that's where it's kind of facilitated through them. Their people are manning the sessions. So again, with adding these new sessions into the new year, we can register on those. So basically you can follow the Men's Network, Support Network, and Love My Mind for updates on that great platform. The Rosewater Connection, we're just getting things rolling with them, and that will be a big part of the new year for us. The 3-on-3 Mental Health Classic, the first one was this summer. They wanted to put on an event for kids, so 9 to 14, boys and girls, and then add a classroom setting to it. So play hockey, go learn about mental health, go back on the ice. It was just so well done for the first year, and I saw the impact that it had on these kids, and I haven't seen kids play hockey and be that happy in a long time. And I said, it's not about the exposure, it's about the need and what do we need to grow this and not just get bigger, but get better. We always pay attention when it comes to our kids, because you have kids,
yeah.
I have kids, we see it, we've seen it. Yours are a little older now, but it's just such a different time to grow up and be a kid and be a healthy kid when it comes to mental health. So wherever we can grab onto something that has to pertain with our kids, we will always try and find a way to support anything to do with our kids. So there's some great ones going on, like we have Youth Matter, which is Laura Lawrence and her team that get into rural schools and talk.
Right.
And then Teens Talk YXE. It's an outlet for kids, and it's a platform for kids to reach out and just get that starting point. So we've donated to them as well and been proud partners to work with them too. So again, like we talked about earlier, a lot of great things going on right here in our community.
Well, it sounds like the support from the community is phenomenal, and there's so many different groups that I didn't know about prior to this episode today that are out there. I want everybody to go out and support Groups like yours, like Love My Mind. I'm going to put the rest of the names in the show notes afterwards so that people can search those out. But what is the final message we give here today, Darren, to people that either are struggling or know somebody that is struggling? Like, what's the first best step?
Yeah, honestly, and that's the $1 million question. And I gotta always start with, we do have to be accountable for our own mental health
Yeah,
when we're capable.
sure.
Um, but it's kind of the three C's for me. It's community, connection, and conversation. We, like yourself, can use our platform, use our network, and take that first step and just, whether it's 10 seconds or 10 minutes, and use that to get your story out and make that connection. And let other people like go, wow, I guess it's okay. If he's struggling, then it's okay that I'm struggling. The conversations are the game changer right now. And with all these wonderful initiatives and programs and projects going on, those are wonderful. But those are kind of the end result. The starting
Right.
point, like you said, is like, let's be more mindful, let's be more accountable, let's be more aware, and take that first step forward to get support for our loved ones and ourselves.
Yeah. I fully agree with that, and the communication and conversation I think is the most important. Isolation and loneliness is not good for anyone, regardless. I know that when I'm struggling, the first thing I know that will help is if I have a conversation with maybe not even someone extremely close to me, like a family member, but just a friend, because the conversation is completely different and it
Yeah.
gives you a different perspective on life. And that's really what people need is they need to talk to someone who just changes their mindset even for an hour. Darren, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. I know that there you have a lot of things going on, and we've been trying to get this episode happening for a
Yeah.
couple months here. It's been phenomenal talking with you. I want to make sure that everybody goes out there and checks out lovemymind.ca, correct?
Yeah.
.ca, and we're going to have the rest of the names in there. And if anybody is struggling out there, reach out, contact a health professional, contact one of the support services that was mentioned on the show today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Quinn.